You've completed Lesson 1, where we've studied the history of outsourcing, the definition of SIAM, the different areas included in the SIAM methodology. Make sure you've completed the lesson exercise before you move on, and don't forget to download and save the accompanying study guide. If you've got any questions, use the link to contact your tutor. They're there to help. Lesson 2. SIAM Purpose, Value, and Drivers. Welcome to Lesson 2. In this lesson, we'll start to look at SIAM in more detail, including its purpose, the business value it delivers, the drivers for SIAM. In Lesson 1, you learned how SIAM introduces a service integrator layer that sits between the customer organization and its service providers. When we study the purpose of SIAM, we need to think about the role of the service integrator and the benefits it delivers. You can see some examples of the service integrator role on screen now. Effective service integration and management allows the customer to focus on its own activities, not on the management of contracts and service providers. The customer benefits from access to specialist capabilities delivered by service providers and can be confident it will receive a service that meets its requirements. It can benefit from competitive tension between service providers and improvements through shared working practices. Many organizations want to be more flexible and agile to allow them to keep pace with market changes. The ability to source and manage services via a SIAM model can support organizational agility. Implementing a SIAM model takes time and effort. It is a significant organizational transformation. To justify the cost and resources that will be required to support this, each organization needs to build a business case for adopting SIAM. Each organization's business case will be different, including both tangible and intangible benefits. Customer organizations need to consider many factors, including their required outcomes, budget, scope, appetite for risk, and existing environment. To build a business case, an organization needs to think about the benefits it expects to receive as a result of adopting SIAM. In other words, the value of SIAM. While each organization's business case will be different, there are some generic benefit groups. We're going to use an exercise to look at these groups. Plan to spend 20 minutes on this exercise, and don't forget to compare your ideas against our suggested solution. The 4 generic benefit groups for SIAM are shown on screen. For each group, use your own experience to note down at least 3 specific examples for that group. For example, for the improved service quality group, you might have an example of less downtime related to changes, because changes are being coordinated effectively across service providers. Good luck! Our final topic in this lesson is the business drivers for SIAM. Drivers are defined as something that creates and fuels activity, or gives force and impetus. Within the context of SIAM, drivers are triggers for an organization to start considering a transformation towards a SIAM model. These drivers and the benefit groups we looked at in the previous exercise all contribute to the SIAM business case for an organization. There are 5 generic driver groups for a SIAM approach, which you can see on screen here. Service satisfaction drivers, service and sourcing landscape drivers, operational efficiencies, external drivers, commercial drivers. In each group, there are a number of specific detailed drivers. We're going to study them in this way. Firstly, we will introduce the group. Then we will look at the specific drivers in the group, and then we will look at one real-world example. There's a lot of detail here, so make sure you review the content if you need to. Click on each group to get started. The service satisfaction group of drivers relates to how satisfied a customer is with the service it receives and the level of satisfaction it expected to receive. There are 7 specific drivers in this group, which you can see here. These drivers reflect the many aspects of service delivery that can affect service satisfaction. If a service isn't performing well or isn't responsive or isn't seen as valuable, the customer will not be satisfied. This can prompt a desire to move to a new way of working. For your exam, you only need to study the drivers in each group, but we're going to look at one example in detail. Let's look at delivery silos in more detail. When a customer organization is using multiple service providers in a traditional outsourced model with no service integration, silos can develop. Each service provider works in its own silo, focused on its own outcomes and goals, which can lead to decreased customer satisfaction. If each service provider only shows the customer a small part of the end-to-end service, it can be very hard to identify improvements, see where there is waste, and share knowledge and experience. We can find a real-world example of delivery silos affecting customer satisfaction in transport. A government acts as the customer organization, operating a railway service for the general public. To operate the service, it engages multiple service providers to maintain the track, maintain stations, operate trains, run ticketing systems, provide staff, and more. If the organization maintaining the track works in a silo, it could schedule track closures without alerting the train operators, leading to delays. If the train operators don't work with the ticketing organization, passengers might be charged the wrong price or sold tickets for trains that don't exist. The government and the public want a seamless end-to-end service. Introducing a service integrator would help to break down the silos, encouraging the service providers to work together and improve the overall service. The Service Sourcing and Landscape group of drivers relates to the number and types of services an organization has, how they are currently sourced, and their complexity. You can see the 5 specific drivers in this group on screen here. Some of this terminology may be new to you, and some of it you may have already encountered in your career. Shadow IT is a term that refers to IT services and systems commissioned by business departments without the knowledge of the IT department. Multi-sourcing refers to services commissioned from multiple service providers but without a service integrator. These drivers are related to the organization's current environment. How complex is it? What is available? How easy would it be to change to a SIAM model? Let's pick out inflexible contracts to study in more detail. Inflexible contracts can be a driver that prompts an organization to change. Many traditional outsourced contracts are for long periods, are expensive to change, and don't allow the level of demand from the customer organization to grow or shrink. This is referred to as lock-in, when it's hard for the customer to change and can lead to frustration. In a SIAM ecosystem, contracts are usually drafted to be shorter, more flexible, and to require service providers to work collaboratively. An example of the potential cost of inflexible contracts can be found from a council in the United Kingdom. Sheffield City Council had a contract with a waste management organization, Veolia, which was meant to deliver savings. When the expected savings weren't delivered, the council voted to exit the contract early. The cost of this, although classified, were reported as huge penalties. Inflexible contracts can mean high costs for the customer and a poor relationship between customer and service provider. The Operational Efficiencies group of drivers relates to possible improvements to the end-to-end service, including efficiencies from standardization and consolidation. The 4 specific drivers in this group are shown on screen here. Service providers who have different service management processes and capabilities, lack of data transfer, lack of an integrated toolset, and incompatible data can all lead to errors and duplication, giving an opportunity for potential inefficiencies. Let's pick out data and information standards to study in more detail. Data and information standards need to be consistent across service providers. If one organization uses severity ratings for incidents, another uses priority ratings, and another uses red, amber, green statuses, it can be very difficult to coordinate and share information. In a SIAM environment, it's common to adopt a data dictionary, that addresses the areas you can see on screen now. Here's an example of miscommunication related to data and information that comes from our course authors. While working at a government department, they worked on an IT service that relied on a database provided by an external organization. The government department had a fixed time of 1 week for incidents that were classed as Severity 3. The service provider had a corresponding incident category, but the fixed time on it was when we have time to do it. Service levels were missed, service was affected, and customer satisfaction fell before this issue was identified and corrected. External drivers are imposed from outside the customer organization. You can see the 2 drivers in this group here. SIAM might be mandated by an external policy from a parent organization or a government policy. Let's look at corporate governance in more detail. Corporate governance requirements are increasing in most countries. If an organization is using external service providers, it needs to be able to define their role, apply controls, and create audit information where required. Failure to comply with corporate governance requirements can lead to a significant business impact. A real-world example of a corporate governance requirement is the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, introduced in the USA in response to high-profile corporate scandals, including Enron. Its objective is to protect investors by improving the accuracy and reliability of corporate disclosures made pursuant to the securities laws. The president at the time, President Bush, described it as to deter and punish corporate and accounting fraud and corruption. Any customer organization that uses external service providers for financial services, such as invoicing, accounting, and payroll, needs to be confident that its entire supply chain complies with the Sarbanes-Oxley requirements, if the act is applicable to them. The commercial drivers apply specifically to organizations who want to offer commercial services related to SIAM, including consultancies, large service providers, and outsourcing specialists. You can see the 2 drivers on screen here. We'll review both in more detail as they relate to different parties in the SIAM ecosystem. Service providers are the organizations that deliver one or more services as part of a SIAM model. As SIAM becomes more and more widely adopted, service providers need to be sure that they can offer services that customers will want to purchase. This means being willing to innovate and collaborate with other service providers and to work with a service integrator. Service providers that do not adapt to these requirements may find their services are less attractive in the market. Customer organizations can act as their own service integrator or source service integrator capabilities externally. Some organizations specialize in providing service integrator capabilities. This is their commercial driver, because this is the service they sell. Why not do a web search and identify some organizations that offer service integrator capabilities? Consultancy organizations can also provide services to support customers during one or more stages of the SIAM roadmap that we'll study later in the course. We're going to end this lesson with a short exercise. Spend 10 minutes on this exercise, and don't forget to check your study guide for a suggested solution. For this exercise, use your own experience in your current organization or an organization you have worked with in the past. What would your organizational drivers for SIAM be? Which group would they come from? Try and think of at least 3 drivers. You can see a reminder of the driver groups on screen now. When you finish the exercise, use the Next button to move on to the end of lesson quiz. You've completed Lesson 2, in which we've studied SIAM purpose, SIAM value, the business drivers for SIAM.